Good morning. How are y'all doing this morning? My name is Kathleen, and I am the owner and the dyer of Good Noodle Yarn Co. This morning, I am going to be dyeing the maize colorway of the Good Noodle Yarn Club, which is called Planting a Rainbow. This is kind of a study in the proportions of the dye. It's a little bit interesting, which I'll tell you about as I'm going along. I'm going to show you the yarn over here on the left. I have 4 different pans, 4 different bases that I dye on. I have my everyday sock and my DK everyday, which are 75% superwash merino and 25% nylon. And then I also have a sparkly sock and a sparkly DK, which also have 75% superwash merino, 20% nylon, and then 5% of the silver stellina. The coloring process that I'm doing today is 3 different layers. You can see up in the top right is completed with all 3 of the layers. And then I'm going to be showing you layer by layer what it is that I'm doing. So we're going to go ahead and start with this. After I'm finished, I will show you the completed colorway. I have one that's finished and dried, and then I also have a project that I'm working on. Good morning, Carrie. Hope you're doing well. If you have any questions while I'm dyeing, you can go ahead and put them in the comments, and then I'll come back and check them. I can't actually see them though while I'm dyeing. Okay, the first layer that I'm going to do right here in this pan is adding the yellow. Now, what I was talking about with the proportions is, and you will see this better when I show you the actual yarn, but when you look at this colorway, it looks as if it's red and orange and there's some yellow in it. But in order to get the yellow to remain prominent when the dyeing is complete, you need to use proportionally way more yellow than you do the other 2 colors, because the orange and the orange, especially the red, is very vibrant, and it kind of takes over all of the other colors that are there. So actually, the yellow, 75% of the dye that I have on this in this colorway is yellow, and then just 30% of the orange, or no. Let's see if I can do my math today. Yeah, I was right. 75% is the yellow, and then the other 25% is the combination of the red and the orange. The orange is a little bit more, so probably 15%, and then the red is about 10%. But those 2 colors you're going to see really are dominant in the color. So I'm going to go ahead and measure out the amount that I'm using. I prefer using a scale. I just get a regular old kitchen scale from Target that measures milliliters. Because I like to be kind of accurate with what I'm putting on there. Okay. Now I'm going to dilute this just a little bit more with some water so that I can make sure to get it good and covered over the yarn. All of this yarn I pre-soaked for, I don't know, I'd say about half an hour or so before I started any of the dyeing. When I'm doing a variegated colorway, I put the acid in the water while I'm soaking because I kind of want the colors to strike a little bit more quickly. On my everyday sock and my everyday DK or DK everyday, I use citric acid as the acid, And with my sparkle yarn, I use vinegar as the acid. I find that if I use citric acid with those, that it kind of dulls the stellina somewhat and it doesn't look nearly as sparkly. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and rearrange this yarn here as I'm getting ready for the second layer. You'll notice when I pull the yarn out of the water, you can see that most of it at the bottom, or most of the white that is left on it is at the bottom, I would say. So the way I rearrange this is I kind of pull the yarn through about maybe a quarter of the way or so that now that's going in the water is a lot more of the yellow. And then I just kind of rearrange this and kind of turn the yarn around so that the lighter colors are on top, and that will be the first place where this next layer will hit. Another thing you'll notice about the way that I'm arranging my yarn here, it's different than a lot of indie dyers do. They'll take a larger pan and lay the yarn out flat and do it that way, especially if they're using like speckles and stuff. But I find for my variegated colorways, if I arrange it like this, then I get a much more even distribution throughout the yarn of all of the colors that I'm trying to use. And I really like the way that looks when you're actually getting ready to use it in a project. Okay, this is an orange color here. I'm going to show you, this is the little bit of the orange that I'm going to use. I'm going to dilute it with water just so that it goes a little bit further when I pour it, but it really isn't very much of the actual dye itself. And then when I'm pouring, I'm trying to be kind of cognizant of putting the same amount of dye on both of the skeins that I have here, because this is a lot, so to speak. A lot, like a dye lot, not a lot. So after I pour it on, let's say before I put it on, I have about, I'd say about half or so of the yarn that's sticking up out of the water. And then I pour the dye on, and then I kind of stick it underneath the water so that that dye will set, and also the dye that is still on the top, obviously, it hasn't absorbed right away. It's going to kind of go down into the side and kind of go up and underneath the yarn, which is another way that we get good distribution and also a little bit more variations and interesting colors. Because in this one here, you can see there's going to be darker areas of yellow and lighter areas of yellow. And then with this orange, there's going to be darker areas of orange, lighter areas of orange. And then each of those are also going to combine with the lighter and the darker yellow. So it's going to kind of make some really interesting combinations. All right, I'm going to go ahead and rearrange this yarn one more time. I'm going to do it exactly the same way. Like I mentioned when I first started, this colorway is called Planting a Rainbow, which is a colorway that I developed for the Good Noodle Yarn Co, which is a monthly yarn club. And every month I make a colorway that's inspired by a children's book. And this month in May was Planting a Rainbow, which is how we came up with this. And the colorways for the yarn club that I make are exclusive for the first year. Now, if you're a member of the club or you become a member of the club, you can get any of the prior colorways, or I can re-dye any of the colorways for you. here. Let me show you this first. This is the red, which is even less than the amount that I used for the orange. So if you're not really into the yarn club kind of thing, then next May you'll be able to get this colorway. Okay, you can see how bright that red is there. I'm going to kind of push it under. Once I have all of the layers on, I'm going to let this continue to steam for probably about another 30 minutes or so. And in between each layer, I let the dye sit for about 15 minutes before I add the next layer, just to make sure that we have, you can really tell the colors and that they don't get all blended together. So we do have some of the yellow by itself, some of the orange by itself, and then some of the red by itself. All right, I'm going to come back over here. Actually, let me go ahead and leave that so we can see what it's doing over there. All right, I'm going to show you the actual colorway, dried and finished. This is how it's going to end up looking. Now notice when you look at this colorway right away, you're like, oh, it's orange, it's red. There are still little bits of yellow in it, but definitely not 75% of this. It's definitely not yellow. That's just something that you learn as you go along. When I first started trying to develop colorways, I was like, well, I want 3 different colors in this yarn. So I'm going to use a third in one color, a third of the other color, a third of the third color. And then, for instance, if I did that with this and that last red that I used, it was a third of the dye is red, then it would have kind of overtaken the whole thing. You wouldn't have been able to see any of the yellow, very little of the orange, and it would have been a very like red-orange skein, which isn't what I was going for this time. Okay, I do have a sock that I have knitted so that we can see how it ends up knitting. See how we have it's very, very red and orange. You can see the bright pops of red. You can still see the orange through here. You can still see some of the yellow. And then there's kind of almost pinky corally pieces through here, which is the combination of the red and the orange and the way they kind of play together. And then there's also it almost looks white on here, but it's just like a very light yellow color, which I think is very pretty. And this is the second sock. I'm not actually finished with this one. I still need to do the toe and I need to cut in the heel. But I just wanted to show you how, even though this was done from the beginning of the skein and this is done at the end of the skein, they're still very similar looking. And I think the reason why we get that is because of the way that we put the yarn in the pan. I think is a large part of it. How's your day going, Carrie? It has been humid here. It's one of those days yesterday where you couldn't even walk outside and like your glasses would fog up. It was that humid. And the temperatures are only in the 80s, but we're getting ready to have a heat wave next week. We're going to be up in the upper 90s and might be over 100 one day, which is a lot. It's definitely a lot. All right, y'all. I dye for you on live. I do it every 2 weeks. Usually it's on Wednesdays. This week I needed to move it to Thursday, but I always let you know beforehand. If you follow me on Facebook or you follow me on YouTube, and I'm Good Noodle Yarn Co. in those places. I'm also Good Noodle Yarn Co. Oh my gosh, I know. The pollen is ridiculous this year. Absolutely ridiculous. And if you follow me in any or all of those places, you'll see when I put up to let you know when it is that I'm going to be dyeing. And I'm going to take this stream and kind of edit it down and condense all of the, some of the chatting and everything. Oh, thanks, Carrie. I appreciate that. So that if you want to go back, if you want to try and dye this yourself, you can go ahead and do that. And it'll be a little bit more condensed, so you can just see the little, just the actual dyeing part, and not necessarily having to hear all about the weather that we're having in North Carolina, etc. So you can check that out. I put that up the following week so that I'm doing something every Wednesday, basically. And until then, I will see you next time.